If you,
and that's not to just this for me anyways doesn't mean that I'm completely cynical about the nature of parties. It's just a realistic understanding of what we're dealing with as people whose biggest concern is to defeat Stephen Harper and make sure that he doesn't form a government.
Right, exactly. And what I'm pointing out is that I think that sometimes people with a position to protect, okay, will not have defeating Stephen Harper as their primary objective. I think protecting their position and advancing that position within the hierarchy to which they belong is their primary objective.
And yet I can see both Thomas Mulcair and Justin Trudeau in the right circumstances. I'm not talking about at the same time. I'm not saying not at the same time either, but possibly each on their own or at the same time, really believing that they have the opportunity to form the next government. Now, I'm not saying I agree with either of those. I'm from the point where we sit today. That's my biggest concern is that I don't think either of these parties has as good of a chance of forming a minority government all on their own.
Right. Okay. And here's the way I think about it. I think that in all likelihood, given the fact that the NDP and the Liberal Party both have very strong leaders in their own rights, right? These are two different animals, but they're both very, very capable leaders. I don't think Stephen Harper can win another majority government with such strong opponents, but I do think that these two men are going to divide the anti-conservative vote, as we know. And the scary thing is, Mike, if they divide it evenly, Stephen Harper can form a minority government.
Because we know the way that those votes are sprinkled throughout different ridings in the first past the post system.
Exactly.
Means. So that's something that I thought I had earlier tonight was I thought, you know what? We know what Stephen Harper does with a majority government. Let's stop pretending that we're already competing with each other in an election that's going to have proportional representation. Because until we do, then we can't really. It's one thing to distinguish yourself from another party. It's another thing to try to attack and be negative about another party.
Now, I understand that both the NDP and the Liberals. I mean, we can talk about the Greens later, but okay, like their 4% of the vote is important. But I mean, we're talking about real players here.
Right.
The people that actually win seats.
But we'll get to that after.
So, the hell was I just saying here?
With the NDP and the Liberals.
With these two parties are going to have to distinguish themselves from each other. They should do it with respect. That's far different than attacking.
Right.
Know? And I mean, while we're on the subject of attacking, I mean, what Elizabeth May did a couple of weeks ago there was to me inexcusable because and I mean, we could play the clip if you want.
Sure, if you got the clip, we can listen to it at least and see what the uproar was.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to pull it up here in a moment. It will take me just another moment.
I got one quick thing here that I can say then just before we go into this clip.
Yeah.
The other thing that I would like to point out is that Stephen Harper, one of his main strategies, I think, has been to polarize politics in Canada, which in a negative way has forced all of these parties to compete.
Yeah.
Now, on a positive spin, I think we need to look at this though, that if we can eventually convince these parties, not cooperating during the election, but if we can get the proper people elected in different ridings, and we focus our energies on who is best placed to defeat a conservative.
Right, strategic voting.
Strategic voting.
Yeah.
Then we can expect these parties to work together. We can ask them and say, like, look, once the progressive people in Canada have voted and put you guys in the position to form a coalition government, we don't expect you to back down from that.
Yeah.
We expect you to work together, be respectful, and find, and when they, this is the good part, when they do find their common ground, because of Stephen Harper, where is it going to lay? It's going to lay on the left of center portions, because as we saw with Justin Trudeau speech tonight, the Liberals are not, they're not that this was even a possibility, but I mean, they're not going to come out and try to stand toe to toe with the Conservatives and have a right-wing platform to get right-wing votes and fight for right-wing votes.
No. I really don't expect that from Trudeau's Liberals.
So I mean, ultimately, as voters, if we put our country before our party, and we look at the riding we're in, and we look at who has the best chance at defeating a Conservative, strategic voting, I think, is now the only way forward. But I mean, that was a long statement to put in front of our
right. We'll get back around to the Elizabeth May.
Okay,
but
sure.
Since you said that, what I want to point out is something. It reminded me of something that Trudeau said in his speech. He says Canadians will become, will become, sort of active in politics when they can see themselves in their government. So his speech tonight was a direct appeal to real, regular people. Do you know what I mean? And on that note, let's move over to the Elizabeth May clip, okay? And and then we'll do some venting about that, because I need to.
Okay.
And then I would like to predict what kind of cooperation that we could expect to see. Not really cooperation, but I mean, for what it's worth.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to ask the leader of the official opposition, in his comparison between trade deficits and ecological deficits, if he would advance the need to actually do something about the climate crisis rather than point fingers back and forth across the aisles. The previous Liberal government had a plan in place. It would have reduced emissions. I'm sorry that I can't be heard.
Yeah, see now.
Yeah.
Placing
that in. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. See now, this is the context in which this comment occurred. When Parliament resumed a few weeks back, the Conservatives came in attacking the NDP on their supposed proposed carbon tax, job-killing carbon tax. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is disinformation. It was downright dishonest. I mean, there's really no other way to explain it other than
and
it's
more
a form of
importantly,
dishonesty.
it was absolutely deliberate.
Yeah, it's
a cornerstone of one of the
even
strategies.
Even more importantly, Mike, it was smart.
Oh,
and it
for sure.
worked. So the NDP is immediately on their heels. Now, is this the time for Elizabeth May to feed into the disinfo that was provided by the Conservatives? This is what I call differentiation. But actually, no, I shouldn't say that. That wasn't merely differentiating her party stand from the from the NDP's stand. This was adding to a Conservative attack, like adding.
So I would call it piling on.
Yeah, piling on. Yeah, piling on. Anyway, it just upset me. I thought that this is one of the most counterproductive things an environmentally conscious politician could have possibly done, especially one who has espoused cooperation with varying degrees of sincerity that I can perceive,
And the reason why I wanted that clip to be played too, and I mean, I know you were right there with me, is you hit the nail right on the head, where the Greens are the party that it seems have the most content. Like, they talk a lot about cooperation, and you see a lot of Green Party members that are interested in cooperation. But just like we said about the Liberals and the NDP, most of these people, to them, if you talk to the party faithful, their idea of cooperation is everybody voting for their party.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and then you get nowhere, and then you know what I mean. What they're eventually hoping for, so they say, is a situation in which somehow miraculously, some government that they have nothing to do with is going to agree to proportional representation. I can tell you, there's only one scenario in which proportional representation will ever be enacted. It's within a coalition government whose coalition is tied to that. Yeah, a coalition government, the coalition which is tied together by a mutual promise to enact proportional representation. There's no other way. If you just wanted a majority government, why would you ever want proportional representation?
Exactly. And I mean, I guess for our listeners, a really quick side note would be to point out that once you get proportional representation, it is more difficult to get a majority of seats in
Yeah.
Parliament.
Yeah.
Because like the Conservatives would control 39% of Parliament and would still have formed the government, but they wouldn't have had the ability to ram legislation through as they do.
Exactly. And why would someone with 39% of the vote, okay, first of all, if you don't win an outright majority, theoretically, a coalition should be able to form a government, right? This is the
Right.
this is exactly where I think this whole thing could go. The only form of cooperation that I can realistically expect between Thomas Mulcair and Justin Trudeau is for neither one of these men to swear off the idea of forming a coalition after the next election. That's the best we can do.
Exactly.
We're not going to see anything else.
And I
as long
suppose
as they
if
don't
they're
promise not to, I'm happy.
If they're both going to take swipes at their party's positions, I hope they stop and draw the line there and don't start taking personal swipes at each other, because that would just be a line that I couldn't. I'd be appalled with either of them if they crossed that line.
I mean, I'm a supporter of both parties. I mean, does that seem weird? I don't have a problem with it myself. Because I think that these parties are merely a vehicle to express oneself politically. I mean, I think party loyalty is part of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Anyway.
But it would almost have to be if these parties aren't gonna, and this is my main thrust of argument these days, is if these parties aren't going to cooperate and we can't realistically expect them to, then we have to look at our other options, and our only other options are to find out and look at the results in our riding. And this is something that I've been doing, is I've been going through each individual riding based on their prehistory and labeling them 1 through 5. 1, an asterisk being this is just conservative held ridings. 1 is where a small percentage of a swing vote can win that riding. 2 is where it takes 25%. That's starting to ask a lot. And then 3, where it starts to become extremely difficult, but still could technically happen. I mean, that's when you ask for a swing vote when you need 90% of the other party's vote, that's a lot to ask. And I understand that that's not as realistic. But the good news is there is a number of ridings that fall in those first 2 categories of a swing vote that takes less than a couple hundred votes to go one way. It just takes a couple reasonable people to understand that even though they're an NDP, they might be better off to vote Liberal in their riding and help a Liberal win, or vice versa. And Green Party voters, right after this Elizabeth May thing went down, and you know what, I got to say, I was a little upset at the tone of people on Facebook and other places, where all they saw in that was they basically booed the NDP for booing Elizabeth May.
Oh, ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I mean, to me, the issue is the attack. I mean, I don't support heckling, but I could understand how human beings would respond like that. Like, it's like basically, what the hell? You know what I mean? What a surprise! Are you on the conservative side? This is the honest reaction. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I can understand why people would heckle that. It's just a
like
natural
taking
response.
A knife and cutting a cut where there's already a cut. It's like the conservatives go out and blatantly lie, and then the NDP calls them on their lie, and the NDP are wrong for calling them on the lie. That's unparliamentary, but lying in the first place isn't. And then Elizabeth May essentially goes and just stabs them right in that wound.
Oh, do you want to talk about another stab on a even worse wound? Remember what she tweeted afterwards?
Yeah, she basically called for people to come out and shame the NDP. Like it was, I think, did she not even mention?
Hang on, she mentioned Layton.
Yeah, I was going to say Jack Layton would be ashamed.
Yeah, no. Here's her tweet. I think I can pull up the exact